And so then I started looking at the permit, and I realized that if something was under 8 feet and under 50 square feet, technically it was not a building. Therefore, it did not need to meet building codes or building permits.
Nice.
I just needed a sales permit. And all I need to do is like the business that it was in front of, they needed to approve it. And then I needed like a seller's license, and I could pretty much go anywhere I wanted. So I was just trying to hack the building permits. And that was how I designed the kiosk to be able to fit within those parameters.
Yo, welcome back to Founder Mode.
Where we unpack how founders crush it.
Jason, DTC, brands going physical. I mean, big move. I mean, when you're like sort of going from that online thing, I mean, me as a software guy, I've been doing a lot of software. And so very rarely do I work at or sort of participate in startups that end up with, a physical office. And so super interesting to learn about like, when is it time to make that shift? And I mean, even for e-commerce, right, where they've, spent all their time building their brand online, like when do they go, IRL?
Yeah, it's an important question. I think if you're selling physical goods, you're a DTC brand and you're making money and you're like, man, I wish my stuff was in that store, just think carefully, because there's a lot of stuff that you don't see behind the scenes happening, whether you're going wholesale into a big channel like the Costco's and Targets and Walmarts, or you're like, I'm going to stand up my own flagship store. It is expensive, right? It is very expensive. And so this one's exciting because we're going to talk about how to do it on the cheap and kind of test the market, much in the same way we run all sorts of experiments online to test if something's working before we go and make a big investment. Let's talk about your experience on this. You're a software guy, right? But any brands come to mind that you've seen make that leap into the physical world? Good or bad vibes? Nightmares?
I was thinking back, like, I'm kind of like thinking back, when was the last time I walked in with a box from the mailbox versus when did I walk in with a bag that like came from a store?
Yeah.
And then literally thinking back, it's been a few months, but it was I brought some shorts at Rory. I'm like a huge Rory guy. And it was literally sort of serendipitous. We were just walking through the mall in Vegas and I was like, oh, those look cool. Kind of saw it. And it's a brand that I've already had and worn.
In the window, you saw it.
Yeah. Like saw some, and I was like, that's a cool different color or whatever. And then, I was basically like going to just take a picture with my phone and then just order it online. But for whatever reason, we walked in and started chatting. I was like, let's see what else is there, because that color was cool. Ended up not getting the one in the window, but one that was on the rack. And they had my size, which is rare, to be honest. And like, and the line wasn't crazy long. Like, so it kind of was required. Like, I would say a lot of the times you go into a store. Perfect storm, where I actually purchased a pair of shorts. And then I came home and I ordered like 3 more of the same time online. And that's, they came, 3 days later. So today we're diving into DTC brands, hitting physical retail, doing it smart and not crashing and burning.
There's huge upside here, but it is a different beast. You need a tight playbook.
Yeah. So we're sitting down with Megan Barry to break it all down.
Megan is a beast. She founded By Reveal, which was acquired in 2021. And now she's a partner at Mentors Fund. She's got Harvard and WashU degrees, and she led Starbucks' first Reserve store.
Yeah, she knows retail inside and out.
All right, let's talk to Megan.
Megan, welcome to Founder Mode. Thrilled to have you, and want to talk about all kinds of things, brick and mortar, DTC, and just excited to have you and the energy on the pod this morning.
Well, awesome. Glad to be here. Love what you guys are doing. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, so let's dive into it, Megan. Your background, which is super interesting, from architecture and founding By Reveal to your work with Mentors Fund, you have such a unique perspective on the topic of de-risking brick and mortar for D2C brands. So we're excited to dive into it. Let's kind of hit you with some questions. You ready?
Always ready. Let's go.
So what was the like initial or single insight that sort of convinced you that this pop-up model could disrupt traditional retail? I mean, we've talked in the past, and it was just amazing to see how that journey. And so I'm curious, like, what was that kind of first spark that in your mind sort of kicked off what became of it?
Yeah, so it was, over 10 years ago, I was working on my graduate thesis, and I was just so amazed that with literally a credit card and an internet connection, people could launch a website, a URL, and then all of a sudden test and learn immediately. They could look at click maps, they could test out SKUs, they could sell their goods globally. And it was just such a smooth sale to be able to test and learn and be able to get your products out there. Meanwhile, I'm in graduate school for an architecture degree looking at these projects that take north of 10 years to do. I'm like, oh my gosh, in my entire life, I'm only going to be able to work on 5 or 6, monumental projects. And so there was just like such a disconnect between the lifespan of how we build buildings versus how quickly technology was evolving. And I was like, oh my God, this is totally diverging, two totally different paths. Like there needs to be some sort of middle ground. Yeah, it was just kind of mind blowing too, because you're 20 something and you're just like, I'm going to change the world. And you're like, oh wait, how am I going
Yeah.
to do this? So
Idealism, right? We've all been there. Now we're here. Let's talk about your architecture training. How did that inform the way that you designed the customer experience when you built Buy Reveal? And maybe just for those who aren't familiar, just like the quick kind of hit on what is Buy Reveal? What was it?
yeah, so Buy Reveal was a pop-up company. We basically did small format kiosks that got deployed pretty much anywhere consumers were. So sidewalks, hotel lobbies, corporate lobbies, malls, public plazas, parks, pretty much anywhere. And it
Amazing.
was this small format boutique that could get deployed in under an hour where consumers could come, touch and feel products, and then transact directly on site. So I was pretty much just trying to hack it. And I was like, okay, well, it needs to be something flat packed and be able to just, in a truck, basically. I was like, and I need to be able to rent a U-Haul and be able to like get it in there and then get it out and set it up. And so then I started looking at the permit and I realized that if something was under 8 feet and under 50 square feet, technically it was not a building. Therefore, it did not need to meet building codes or building permits.
Nice.
I just needed a sales permit. And all I need to do is like the business that it was in front of, they needed to approve it. And then I needed like a seller's license and I could pretty much go anywhere I wanted. So I was just trying to hack the building permits. And that was how I designed the kiosk to be able to fit within those parameters.
So good. And so like what was that sort of KPI that sort of triggered like, okay, pop-ups there, it's activated. Like when is it ready to scale into a permanent store? Or what is that indication that like, well, it's ready to go to the next step?
Well, my business was pretty much all on only pop-ups. So I was just convincing clients that they always need to test and learn and just keep on going. But what we did get to is realizing that once you had unaided brand awareness with the customer and wherever that was, whether if your target market was on the East Coast, on the West Coast, in vacation destinations, etc. Once you had that, then you were ready to deploy that large amount of capital, which to do a good flagship, it's a couple $1,000,000 time you're set and done. So a lot of it came down to just how can you test and learn in these hyper local markets and then create nuances that you could potentially scale online with targeted specific marketing campaigns.
Makes total sense. And for these early D2C brands, $1 million ARR, how do you think about and to give them talking to them now, founders that are doing this, what's the kind of budget and timeline for that first pop-up to de-risk the move before they, go spend 2 million on a flagship store? How would you advise somebody wanting to do this today?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to understand like, what are you trying to test, and then how can you design an experience or piggyback off of an experience that is already has some sort of like a time-bound initiative around it. And so that's why I think a lot of these festivals and conferences have really blown up. So you think of Coachella, you think of South by Southwest, Art Basel Miami, those are areas where you already have your demographic selected. You already have these time-bound experiences selected. And for us, we found that it was great to be able to understand where could we insert ourselves, and insert our clients into these experiences. So, for example, if you spend all day listening to music at South by Southwest and you come back to your hotel, you have a couple hours to kill before you go out to dinner, what do you want to do? Well, the number one thing you want to do is you want to sit, you want to relax, you want to have a drink. And so we launched a series of different beauty brands in hotel lobbies at South by Southwest
Smart.
by giving people, a complimentary glass of bubbly, and they would sit down, they would try on a face mask, they would, engage in a product, they would get a mani-pedi, whatever it was, and then we'd be able to give them like some sort of gift bag where then we could measure the bounce back after the activation or after
Mm.
South by or after, those different areas. So I think a lot of brands struggle because they decide to go into brick and mortar with this idea of this beautiful four walls and they're like, oh, we're just going to open up a store and then they will come. Not necessarily. So you need to be very, very hyper specific about who you're going after, why you're doing it, and then what you're looking to test, ideally with almost like a teaser, like a subset of the product offering. So then
Mm.
you encourage people to come back to either your site or, follow you on Instagram or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so, how do you judge like a digital native brand's storytelling? Like, how do you know that will translate to a physical space? I think, like you said, that it's like you're not just going to go and build a flagship. You're going to do something. How do you sort of know, like, hey, they've got a set of storytelling that's going to make sense for something IRL?
Well, a lot of times it doesn't, because we usually, I mean, if you think about your phones, which is where a huge amount of mobile commerce transact, you have two eyeballs and most of the time two hands, and you're completely focused on that thing. And when you're walking down a sidewalk or you're in a mall or you're shopping in some cute little street, you are so distracted. You're constantly looking up. Maybe you're with your kids, maybe you're with friends, you're meeting there. So I think a lot of times people need to understand that you need to really sort of optimize every single square inch of that physical area. A consumer may just walk by the front store and be like, oh, that's interesting. They'll pull it up on their phone. Or they may just walk in and be like, oh, this is nice. This smells pretty. I'm going to look at this later. Or they may come in and try something on and then decide they want to buy it later. So I think those elements are really important, and understanding the consumer journey and knowing that it's not going to be sequential, like how you're scrolling in a very sequential way online. So it comes back to just picking something hyper specific that you can test and say, okay, what is the message? If somebody glances at us for 3 seconds, what are they going to receive from that? And then are we aligned with what the current mindset is of that particular location? You'll notice there aren't a lot of great retail stores next to banks. Why? Because banks are boring. You're never in a good mood when you go to a bank. Well, maybe you are, but I'm not. It's like I'm trying to get in, trying to get out. But when you think about like the best restaurants, you think about great experiences, whether it's cultural or what have you. That's where great retail is, because people are in that mindset of taking a moment to pause, and they want to walk, and they want to see like, oh, what is that? What is this? And then that's where you have those opportunities to kind of insert your brand in a great way.
Is there a non-obvious signal that you look for to say, okay, we're ready to go to a physical retail presence for a brand? Is there something that's like, oh, if this bit flips, now I know we can greenlight that physical store?
Yeah, I think a huge amount of it is dwell time. And figuring out a particular location if there's the dwell time that supports it. A lot of brands, because brands that succeed nowadays, it's beautiful pictures. And if you could put together beautiful pictures and captivating videos or things like that, that's what helps you succeed online, on e-commerce. But in physical retail, it's not like that. So sometimes I'll have brands where they say, oh, we really want to go to this little area and we just think it's so beautiful and quaint. And I'm like, yeah, it's quaint, it's quiet. That's
No
not good.
foot traffic.
We don't want that. We want, busy and bustling and things like that. So if you can figure out if a location has, a high dwell time where people are hanging out there for a long time, whether it's groups of people or, families or things like that, then you more likely have an opportunity to help have your brand discovered in that moment. But the in and out transactions, those are very difficult to be able to have an experience that's horrible.
What assumptions are like sort of brick and mortar CAC, like our founders getting wrong in 2025? Like you mentioned like the dwell time. Like, are there other things that, founders are sort of getting, wrong?
Yeah, a lot of it is just it's matching the consumer experience with the cadence of purchase. So for example, if you're selling socks, how many times a year do you want consumers to buy your socks? That is probably a lot lower rate with a higher quantity versus a esthetician or some sort of a spa service. Ideally with a spa service, you want people coming back every
That recurring sort of, yeah.
Exactly. So it's like if you want people to come back every single month or every single 3 months, like how are you designing that consumer experience in order to match that? And I think Zara does this really well. Like they want people coming in their stores at least once a month. So they swap out their merchandise every 2 to 3 weeks. It gets people coming back in. But then you look at some of these department stores and these legacy department stores and they're like, gosh, we don't understand what's going wrong. It's like, well, you don't switch out your merchandise. It's like 3 to 6 months. It's like, well,
The same suits, the same pants, the same shoes, like literally nothing new.
Right. It's like you've seen it once, like you'll come back in 3 months when they swap it out, so matching that cadence. And if you can get the cadence of purchase aligned with the consumer experience, then you can really start to see your CAC dive down. But a lot of times people get false hope from a pop-up or from a short-term activation because they get a huge amount of people coming in and huge amount of people buying, but they're buying one time and they haven't really designed an experience or helped people understand the value of building a relationship with that brand. And that's where sometimes things don't translate well into a longer term store.
Let's talk about COVID. So,
You
contact.
mean where I cried every day?
Yeah. So many of us did. Contactless retail. Talk about how your playbook has shifted to de-risk, on the flip side, the physical store world, in a world where, the shifting between D2C e-com and the physical world, and this idea of the pop-ups as kind of a step function there. How do you think about it now post-COVID, and what's that playbook that you would articulate to the founders that are trying to do this?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that have stayed with us. I mean, I think if we think about these QR codes, which we all just thought was so ugly, really another QR code like tapped onto a gift bag, really? Like, how are we doing? But most restaurants still have the QR codes. Like, it's still kind of working, right? So I think that when you think about contactless retail, it's really about how can you have the lowest friction experience and the least amount of barriers to entry to help the consumer get what they want when they want it in that little micro moment they have to be able to pop into your store in and out. And so that really comes into one, the sequencing, which we spoke about, but also understanding, a lot of storefronts are designed like a shotgun. And so you only have, 10, 15 feet of frontage, and then it goes back 30 or 40 feet. And traditionally that was because people had a lot of inventory. They had a back of house inventory. Now people don't really need that back of house inventory, because ideally, if you want to have a, low CAC, high ROI store, you want to ship to the consumer so you can get more data. So you ideally want someone to come in, try out all these products and say, you know what, ship it to me. And then you get all that information, all that data. So with stores now, it's about how, if somebody just walks by, are they going to have a good experience? And is the brand message going to resonate? If they come in for 2 minutes, are they going to have a good experience? Is the brand message going to resonate? And then, if they stay for 10 minutes, if they stay for 20 minutes. And one thing that we also realized is, what taints an experience? And gentlemen, not to scrutinize on you, but
Please.
most of the time, it's
We
the
deserve this.
spouses that taint the experience, because you're
100%.
like,
Where's the
come
chair? I
on,
need to
let's
sit down.
go.
Yeah, need chairs. You need a good place to sit and sit on
Right?
your phone.
I need to be able to look at my phone
Exactly.
while my wife takes as long as she needs. Yeah.
Yes. So
Better
so
yet, don't bring me.
right, exactly. So, it's, the contact list is just one area of reducing friction, but also, making the whole group, the shopping group, and spouses and children comfortable is also like another way of reducing the friction.
What do you think about like emerging tech like AI or some of the new insight stuff, and how will that kind of reshape? I mean, you talked about analytics and what can happen in the store, but how do you think that will just change how physical retail works over the next coming years?
Well, ideally, it will solve one of the things that has still not really been cracked, and that's just understanding the consumer journey. Right now, consumers are getting educated on so many different platforms, and it's all over the place. So you think about just buying a car. Traditionally you just go down to the dealership, you talk to Joe Schmo, and you say, "Hey, I'm looking to buy a car." He would talk your ear off for like 45 minutes, and then you'd be like, "All right, fine, I guess I'll get this one." But nowadays, when you walk in, you're like, "Hey, I want to test drive this one and this one, and these are my questions. Like, tell me the
Yeah.
answers right now." So consumers are so much more educated on what they want. Because of that, they're dancing around all these different channels and all these different platforms. They may have walked into a department store and then walked into your flagship and then scrolled on Instagram and then went to your website. And right now, where the analytics are, we can't trace that. So we're guessing about how educated a consumer is, and we don't know if, was it a billboard? Did they get lucky? Did someone message it to them on Instagram? Did they see it, at a department store and then they tried it on, but they didn't have the colorway, so then now they're in our store? We just have no understanding
Mm.
of the entire, collage of the consumer. So ideally, with all the different tags and cookies and, all the analytics that are coming in, ideally we'll be able to sync that much more and be able to provide much more specific and accurate consumer profiles and understand that consumer journey a lot better. Because
Yeah.
right now, a lot of us are guessing at the wall. No one will admit that, but that's the truth.
Another one I'm interested in is, how does like AI revolution and ChatGPT change this? Kevin and I talk about this a lot, but next time I want to buy something, I may not be going to Google, I may be going to ChatGPT, and it's then how are those results optimized to send me to your brand or somebody else's, right? So continue looking into the future. What does the optimal omni-channel footprint look like for a consumer brand that has successfully de-risked its physical presence? How do they set themselves up for success?
I think it's going to be even more channels than we have now. I think it is going to continue to be a really solid mix between the social media and the websites, but also these flagship stores and these pop-up stores and these activations, as well as the department stores. I think, right now, a lot of brands, because of how it's set up, you have to hit a certain revenue mark in order to get to the department stores, in order to even have a sit down. And so that's why a lot of brands started with pop-ups, because they need to kind of proof out that concept. Now in order to grow, because it's so expensive with the the acquisition costs with marketing and all of that, brands need to push like on all cylinders, all of the channels. And so I think, growing, ideally, when you spoke to a brand, 7 years ago, their goal was just to have 3 to 5 flagship stores, and that was it. And then it started to change. And now brands are very much like they're trying to push the hotel partnerships. They're trying to push any sort of Pilates partnership, whether you're a wellness company, a nail company, whatever. It's like we are in the studio. And you're also trying to get into the department stores. You can have that long-term kind of business continuity of like a clean buying cycle. And then you're also trying to have these small short-term leases, which now are a little bit difficult to get, to be able to be wherever you want, be wherever the consumer is. So I think it's just going to be consistently evolving. And the dream mix of what it was 10 years ago and 5 years ago and today it's all changing because the consumer is changing, because how we shop is changing. How often we leave our house is changing. Why we leave our house is changing. And that all impacts, our discretionary spend and where we're spending it and our mind share.
Super good. I mean, shifting gears a little bit in your work with Mentors Fund, I think, now when you're like looking at a pitch and sort of thinking about that, like that first 30 seconds, whether they're considering physical retail or not, like what is it that as you think about like these shifts that we've seen over the last decade, what is it that you're like, wow, when you hear this, that's like something that's exciting and makes you want to lean into that pitch and feel like you want to hear the rest of the founder's story?
Yes. Well, I think as much as, so many founders having extreme amount of passion, and I'm just like, oh, I love this. This is great. But you really have to take a step back and realize, like, is this a fad or is this something that's durable? And that is kind of, the investor's job of figuring out like, okay, can this scale? Is this just a one-off thing? Is this just a short-term fad? And so I think, understanding if they can cross that mark and make sure that there are certain indicators and catalysts that are not just today's headline, like that's super important. And sometimes we get carried away and we have to catch ourselves like, okay, no, this is definitely a fad. We love the fad. We're all on the fad, but it's a fad. It's not going to be around in a year and a half.
Cupcakes, cookies, donuts, anybody? Okay, no. So what's the red flag deal killer? Like what's something that you hear this in a pitch and it's dead and you think they're not going to make it?
Yeah, it sounds cliche to say, but the passion, so many founders try to be so serious and just so like, this is our solution and it's going to be great. And we know it's going to be great because of this. And I think sometimes people come off of not being very open-minded. And I think it's very difficult because you're trying to raise money and you're trying to show that like, we've figured it out, we've cracked it, all we need is your check and like, then we're good to go. But I think now more than ever, you need to be super nimble and just very open, like, super passionate, but very, very open. And a little crazy, right? Like in order to be a good entrepreneur, you need to be a little bit nuts. So, if you're too, monotone and, it's like,
We embrace the crazy here on Founder.
Yeah.
Definitely into the crazy thing. Like that's kind of a first and foremost first principles.
Yeah. If you knew how hard it was, nobody would do it. So
Exactly. So, I mean, when you're coaching portfolio CEOs or talking to founders, like what is your sort of viewpoint on, balance of like this speed and execution versus saving cash and sort of, I mean, just the difference in building teams with AI these days where like the efficiency that you can get on small teams is pretty insane.
Oh, it's unreal. I was literally thinking how much money I would have saved if I started my business like 5 years later.
Don't we all, right?
Seriously. So, I kind of go back to like the main ethos of, how do businesses fail? Like the first one, they fail with co-founder fights. And the second one they fail is running out of cash. So I think those two things need to be optimized. Like do not fight so far that you ruin a relationship and do not run out of cash. And I think it's, you always need to have some sort of a conservation capital because it's very easy to get swept up into what investors are saying or what your advisors are saying or what your customers are saying and just tailspin without having a reserve. And I like to just say you always need to have fuck you money just to be able to walk away if something tailspins and you're like, shoot, wait, we are too far. This did not work. And you don't want, something to destroy the business. I think that's very important. You need to just make sure you always have certain amount of capital reserves. And it's like a rainy day fund, right? You don't ever want to do anything that puts your livelihood at risk. But that's my more conservative approach. And I think a lot of people have winning stories going the opposite way.
I think in 2025, that's smart. We see so many companies, at least in the last 12 to 18 month cycle, run out of money. So being a little bit more conservative is the right way to go. And then pairing that with small teams and leveraging tools and AI is smart. Kind of on the other side of this, when it comes to doing good while also doing well financially, how do you think about social impact metrics and community building as you look at like a brand to invest in on the Mentors Fund side, or just looking at a brand and thinking about their retail strategy? How do you do that? How do you do good and not dilute the ROI side of it?
Well, it's very easy to get carried away on doing totally divergent things. It's like, oh, this is what's going to make us money, and then this is what's going to, make us, sound great, and this is what's going to do all of this. But ideally, the consumer experience is completely interlocked with that. So, for example, we launched a lingerie brand during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we had an experience where consumers could come up and write notes to people fighting cancer. To like a heartstring moment where we're able to establish a community impact, be able to establish feel-good moments for people, and also give that brand a way to identify with their community members in a totally different way. And then from there, we donated a variety of different SKUs to UCLA's cancer research. So I think I think if you can find moments to really tie in your brand ethos to the consumer experience and do something that people actually care about, it's very important. I think brands who try to do it, every week or every month, like,
Not authentic. Yeah.
yeah, it comes a little too far. I mean, if you can do it, more power to you. I'm sure AI will give you a great solution of all the different events you can attack. Just stay authentic, because now more than ever, it's very easy for consumers to pick up on this. But yeah.
Looking back, you talked about AI, but what would you have automated earlier, or what would you have been like the first couple of things that you would have automated to accelerate growth and just make building, by Revealed easier?
Everything. No, I think training and logistics. So that was something that took a huge amount of time. And I think if you think about the best salespeople in retail and events or whatever it is, they are on their feet 18 hours a day. They are running around. They're speaking a mile a minute. They do not learn by sitting in front of a Zoom for an hour and a half session, like on a PowerPoint. Like that is not the best way they learn. So if you can use AI to be able to take like, hey, look, here's this training manual and here's all this brand data. I need this person to absorb. This is their, personality SKU test, whatever, yep. Myers-Briggs, whatever it is. Like, give me a video sequence of all this information that they can listen to while walking, or doing their morning run. Done. Like, I mean, we would have had such a higher rate of high quality people being able to absorb super custom information. So yeah, that would have been amazing.
Awesome. So thinking about the folks that are listening and giving yourself advice, kind of reflecting back like you just did, if you could talk to your pre-MBA Megan, what is the piece of career advice, the one piece that you would want her to know about navigating the intersection of design, business, technology in
I would say, if it's annoying, fix it.
I love that.
I kind of, I went straight through from my undergrad into my MBA. So I was the youngest in my cohort. And I spent a lot of my time just trying to look at other people and be like, oh, wow, they were like 5 years at a consulting firm. Like, oh, they did this. Like, I should try to be more like that. Or I should try to think like this. And at the baseline, like, look, if it's annoying, just go fix it. There's no reason why these legacy systems, just because they've been around for 30, 50, 100 years, should exist if it's annoying and you don't like it. So just, forget about how things have been done historically and just go fix it. Go do something better.
Megan, this has been fantastic. Where can listeners find you online or learn more about your work?
Oh, I think like LinkedIn for now. I think that's probably the best.
So we'll include that in the show notes. Just really fun conversation. And thank you so much for sharing your insights with us on Founder Mode. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. This was a lot of fun. So thank you and keep it up. I'm excited to listen to your future episodes.
Wow, that was a masterclass from Megan Barry on de-risking brick and mortar.
Absolutely. So many actionable takeaways. What stood out to you, Kevin, from what Megan shared?
Yeah, a few things. So I think first, pop-up retail is this kind of low-risk bridge. So to go from like your online DTC all the way to brick and mortar. I think the flat pack kiosks of like keeping it less than 8 feet, less than 50 square feet, this sort of gets around the building permits. Like that's true founder mode right there in terms of figuring out, how to how to get it done. And then those core KPIs, like when to scale up, unaided brand awareness, sort of high dwell time, really understanding that. And I think, COVID obviously being a big thing for sort of in person, and understanding like what is that frictionless design, like contactless checkout, minimal inventory. And I mean, a big one for me, it's like if you're going to be shopping all day, I want to have a place to sit and play on my phone and kind of hang out.
Where are we sitting?
While you're shopping. And then finally, I mean, this just notion of how AI is impacting omnichannel and sort of aligning the sort of tracking or cadence across that customer journey from online to offline.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. It was a great interview and a great conversation. So if you're a founder that's navigating these waters or knows someone who is, this is definitely an episode to share with them.
And if you haven't already, subscribe to Founder Mode. It's your favorite podcast on your favorite platform, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And, leave us a review if it helps, and would love to share the word with others.
Yeah, you can find links to Megan's LinkedIn and everything else we discussed here in the show notes today. And coming up on our next episode, we're going to shift gears back into the tech side of things.
And that's right. We'll have JJ Zhuang, my long-term partner, 27 years, joining us to talk about how to bootstrap your tech team using AI. It's going to be a fantastic discussion leveraging AI to build and scale your engineering efforts efficiently. All right, that's a wrap for this one. Remember, when it comes to retail, don't just follow the foot traffic, follow the data, and de-risk your dream.